Après un exposé aussi brillant.
After such a brilliant presentation from Mr. Amusu, it is difficult to start taking the floor. So, he has already presented many points that concern migration. So, my statement will not focus on the presentation of migration. I already did that in Nouakchott during the AMSEP Congress. I will just tell you that it's a project co-financed by the European Union and for public employment services. The European Union is funding at 80% and Pôle Emploi, and the, uh, the Swedish Public Employment Service, ANAPEC, and the agency of Tunisia are funding this project. The idea is to accompany 5 public employment services of West Africa, Mauritania, Cape Verde, Ghana, Togo, and Senegal, to create a public service offer on professional mobility to enable persons who wish to migrate, migrants who return, especially the diaspora, and employers who want to hire people of the diaspora or those who come from abroad, so that they should have an interlocutor who can answer their questions, especially public employment services, to accompany them their development needs. So this project started in January 2017. Pôle Emploi France is the leader of the project, and I am the manager of this project. And every partner country makes available to me a manager to lead. So, to summarize, there are 3 main thrusts: creating a reference service provision at the international level, the development of information systems, because we are selecting service providers. Everything is prepared for every country, and then working on regional synergies with actions groupings. In December, we will group all public employment services that are beneficiaries in Senegal for an exchange and an international exchange forum. We have a number of activities, and we know what we have to do to put at the disposal of beneficiary countries so that we can help them to work on legal professional migration. Yesterday I was talking of the action of Senegal, who sent migrants to Spain. It was a job done with Pôle Emploi France and ANAPEC Morocco. So we give a continuous support to ANPEJ Senegal to help migrants leave on time, because there was a need of 49 migrants to go within a month and a half. So it's an organization, and we set in place. Today's presentation will be global. We'll question the role of public employment services in migration. So the plan, we'll talk of the context of migration in West Africa, and we'll also see the conceptual aspect of what we've seen so far over the past 2 days. We'll repeat some points that are very important. Institutional form to manage the migration of labor. Recently, the previous speaker talked of the actions that have to be carried out. That is the role of the public employment service. We'll talk about that. Then the role of public employment service, institutional framework for the implementation of public policies. The government defines public policies that have to be implemented. Public employment services represent an important stakeholder in the implementation of these public services, because there are a number of functions that the public employment service should carry out. So we're here to create and deliver services. Then
D'accord. Oui, la-
so the context of the migration of labor, West Africa, I'm taking this image from the French documentation that shows migrant flows. It is for information purposes because migrant flows represent in West Africa around 7.5 million people who travel. But for the migration of labor, we don't know among these 7 million people how many are migrant workers. But there is a flow, and we see that the flow goes towards a direct to a specific area. People go to Cote d'Ivoire, but they also go towards other West African countries. What should be understood in this diagram and globally is that the last data from IOM talk of 250 million people who are considered migrants across the world. 1 on 25 people, and half of them are workers. So we see that many of the people who migrate are migrant workers. If we go back to the conceptual approach and strategic stakes of migration, we realize that migration creates an institutional problem because some institutions need to intervene to facilitate the mobility of workers. There is a creation of an institutional framework that should exist within countries, such as labor policies and actions that should be carried out, including integration and reintegration programs for the youth on markets, national mobility strategies for workers, and a legal framework that is very important to be put in place, as it will determine the efficiency of the management of labor.
La migration de main-d'œuvre, c'est basé sur le droit.
Based on the rights of laborers, the social rights of workers that are governed by conventions, and the Convention 97 1949 that was reviewed in 1975 to determine how a migrant worker should be treated. Every public service should have this convention posted in its public employment service because it is a regulatory and legal framework that is very important and which should be known by all who are involved in this employment sector. There are regional stakes on public governance and management of the labor market, local and national stakes on issues of unemployment, because all these problems, all these issues should be dealt with through the migration question and should be at the center of the Association of Public Employment Services, as you are doing now, or at a higher scale within WAPES, or at a world scale, or the various ministries of labor. So there is need to work on the creation of tools like the Observatory of Employment, because it needs to help to have specific knowledge on the labor market. We talk of the management of labor. When we talk of labor, there are migrants who leave, circular migrants, that is seasonal migrants, migrants who return, and migrants in competence development. These are people who are developing their competencies who can become migrants. When you take a migrant who is leaving, someone who intends to migrate needs to be accompanied. and we can use bilateral agreements to accompany these migrants by proposing a service that is adapted to their expectations. We have secular migrants, seasonal migrants, as our Moroccan friend presented. For example, someone who goes to Morocco to work under a public employment service, and we have migrant potentials. That's people who go as students or researchers who go to a country and who stay and work there because there are facilities for them to work in that country, and who later become returning migrants because at some point they want to come back to their country of origin. And all these elements should be considered in. So, what institutional form can be put in place to manage the migration of labor? And the question is simple: public employment service. That is a structure that is most adapted to bring an operational response. There are political responses that can be given within the Ministry of Territorial Administration or Foreign Affairs. We can construct walls if you want, but if you want to bring an operational response, we must focus on depend on the public employment service, because these 4 points are very important, because it's an institutional framework that is adapted to in this important point you see the 4 functions of the public employment service in the implementation of public policies. It is an organizational structure to create and provide services to final beneficiaries. It means a public employment service should be able to create services and deliver these services from where it is or through agencies or centers, as they are called in English countries. It is a structure that is able to intervene in the unfolding of a process in a country or the sub-region for the mobility of workers. It is also it is a structure that has know-how on intermediation. You cannot be a public employment service without knowing how to mediate. If you don't intermediate, if you don't make placements, then you are not a public employment service. This is what gives legitimacy, institutional legitimacy, to intervene on issues of migration of labor. I was talking a while ago of the 4 functions that a public employment service has to realize. Okay, there we go. Thank you for the support. There is the function number 1, information on the labor market. In France, in Pôle Emploi, we are responsible for the realization of the investigation on the need for labor. In 2009, we had a list of development projects on over 2 million posts. These are recruitment positions that companies send to us. That is the role of public employment services. 51% of these 2 million are difficult projects. These are companies that tell us they can't find people to fill their vacant positions, and amongst the most important positions are workers and seasonal workers, 33.8%. So at the level of this BMO investigation, we identified 10 professions where it is very difficult to find workers. It is very sure within the framework of Agreement 97 that helps us to introduce labor, foreign labor, that we go and seek maybe at the European or North American and African markets. Sometimes we bring foreign labor on to provide their expertise, especially in automobile industry, geometers, builders, mechanics, motor mechanics, qualified agents in thermal processing, and electricians. So these are jobs, these are surveys that helps us to know the difficulties we may face in recruiting. So we would orient some training to intervene on the policy, the labor policy. We know that we have difficulties, so we guide our active policy for the labor market towards these jobs that are difficult to find workers for. Talk of information. If you talk of information, you talk of collecting information, leading investigations, providing statistics to the states, having a data collection system at the providing indicators to economic actors. When a company tells us they want to recruit
Au sud ou au nord de la France.
we should be able to tell every employer that we can provide him with any person or any expertise he may need. We cannot tell him we don't know where to find this or that person. It's our job. So information on the job market is one of the functions. Another function is passive policy on the labor market. Generally, it's when there is a problem of scarcity of jobs on the labor market, a public employment service intervenes to reduce the demand. It is an economic mechanism to reduce job applications by reducing the number of unemployed people on the labor market. You are all public employment services. You can imagine what can be done to reduce unemployment on the market. Then there is placement services. The placement of a job seeker. It means any operation that enables the facilitation of access to a job seeker. So that is placement. Is our role as a public employment service. And active policy, you all did that, because in all presentations you talked of a number of actions you carry out on the labor market. That's part of the active policy of the labor market. So I don't have much time. I've given the various functions that will help you to have more precisions and the finality of active policies to enter the role of public employment services. So the role of public employment service is to create and issue services to final beneficiaries, which is very important. You cannot be a public employment service and not have service offers for job seekers, not have service offers for employers and partners. You must be able to create services and deliver them. Creating them is not enough. You can have everything on paper and say we have all possible services, but how are they delivered and what are the outcomes? In Pôle Emploi, we have 14 indicators that are very important. We have others under the tripartite convention, and which helps us to monitor every year. It is very important in service creation, especially if we want to work on the migration of labor, and that's what we do in migration. Every country has created a reference of labor mobility. We work with our partners on the creation of this referential on mobility service, and the creation and establishing a service to provide a service is not enough as well. We need to have a team to deliver these services. Create conditions of fair recruitment of migrants. In 2014, the ILO explains how employment is considered fair. As a public employment service, it's our duty to accompany and inform job seekers and monitor and ensure the equity of recruitment at the international level and ensure that gender issues are respected. Let some people not be preferred to others. So I encourage you to download the convention from the ILO. A job seeker should not pay to go and work abroad. I don't know how you manage that with private operators, but you need to find a match, because it lays the question of accessibility to the public service. If someone has to pay, what about those who cannot pay? Are they excluded from this service? No. So we should be able to ensure that everyone has equal access to this service. Those who want to pay to have another service can go to private operators, but as a public employment service, we must be able to accompany them and ensure that migrants are protected and not paid to have a tourist visa and find themselves in it with a tourist visa. Meanwhile, when they were needing a workers visa. So that's the role of public employment services. And gradually, the issue of illegal migration would reduce. People who know they can go legally take less risks, because the risks are very high if you want to go illegally. So after the last point is provide organizational and structural support during the process and migration cycle. Since time is against us, we'll go a little faster. We should be able to meet the demands of employers. An employer who calls you up and says, I had a contract with your government and I must exploit a mine and I need 200 miners. If you cannot provide 200 miners, we should know where we can have 200 miners. There are countries that are experts in mining issues. Why not invite them? Because the risk is that the employer will not carry out his contract because there is no labor and the economy would suffer. So this information and the capacity of support should be carried out by the Public Employment Service. Another important point is in the migratory cycle. There is a pre-departure phase, the migratory phase, and the return phase. From the pre-departure phase is the important point where the Public Employment Service is whose role is important. Our colleague talks of talking of preparatory phases. You cannot let someone go without telling him where he's going, knowing the working conditions of the host country, conditions of access to the labor market, have reliable information on conditions of recruitment so that he should not pay to someone who doesn't even know the country, because sometimes there are illusion sellers out there. It is our duty to constitute a network and get information on what's happening. Know if the job offers that we see online are real. So we should be able to contact each other to ascertain the authenticity of jobs that are posted. We had our Senegalese colleagues who contacted us for some projects, and we confirmed this to them. We will not rebuild the world. Some have done that already. We need to work in synergy, and WAPES is there to support you on that. Exploit bilateral agreements. We don't know what bilateral agreements are because most of these are in ministries of foreign affairs, and we are under the supervision of the Ministry of Employment and Labor, depending on the country. But in bilateral agreements, there are clauses on labor agreements. Go read them. Ask the ministries to give you. I remember I went and saw the Minister of External Relations to work on these issues. So it is a very important work. The migratory phase. The migrant who has been chosen to go has to be accompanied. So you need to give him administrative support, as Morocco has done and other countries, and as Senegal too followed suit a few months ago. There is this administrative part that the job seeker doesn't know. Some have never left their villages before, so we should be able to support them and help them to prepare an administrative document. They don't have passports, so we'll be able to accompany them. We need to help them prepare their files for project funding. And we should ensure that the destination country protects the rights of migrant workers. Just go to the ILO website and you will see all the countries that have signed and those that have not signed. I will not denounce you, but you will see for yourself. So if someone asks you for labor and has not signed the Convention 97 and the recommendations that apply to it, then ask yourself some questions. Where am I sending my workers to? And ask to be enlightened on working conditions. The migrant worker cannot ask such questions because he's not even in a position to do that. You are an institution. You can ask the question, so it's up to you. So professional reinsertion. Now the return phase. Someone who spent 6 months working, he wants to create his activity, he wants to come back, you must be able to accompany him. Within the project of migration, we have trained heads of migration units in countries, and we help them to have the technical know-how to manage return migration. They went to Turin, I accompanied them, and the ILO as well, for a week's training on the issue of migration. And last point is the key parameters that we should certainly master to manage return migration. To better implement it, a well-defined course. What does it mean? It means at the country level, you should sit with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Labor Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and tell them clearly the management of migration is your job. So we want a legal and regulatory framework on mobility. This legal framework must be shared and applied by all. I cannot bring migrants and then they are blocked at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. What I appreciated in migration countries, whenever we organize workshops, there is always someone from the Ministry of Territorial Administration who is present, who gives us their opinion on the laws and issues of migration, how it's managed at the technical level in their country, so that public employment services should have levers to better dialogue with employers. Because you dialogue with employers, you must be able to explain to them what obtains in your country. And when the mobility service is carried by your agents, when someone asks a question on mobility, your agent should be able to answer him, because it is a public service and we are at the service of the public. Circulation or information flow. Information is vital. If you master information, then you master almost everything. So how is the digital used to polish up the imperfections of the labor market? So the digital age has come for that and brings answers to mobility issues. It could be national, it could be sub-regional. My employer could be a cement factory in Douala that needs 200 people and qualified workers are found in Yaoundé. We should be able to inform job seekers, and we should have this information. Strategic interest for public employment services to master the data of the labor market. It's up to them to advise them on the most productive sectors. I don't have against sociologists and anthropologists, but you need to train according to the market needs. If we agree on that, the university is a universe of knowledge. We go there to learn, to have knowledge, but the labor market is something else. So you need a certain adaptability in training to meet the needs of the labor market and work in partnership with international organizations.
Et la migration du travail doit être un outil d'intégration régionale.
Labor migration must be a tool of regional integration. Government must be favorable to this environment, and it's up to you to impel it. A public will to accompany migrant workers, and labor migration should an integral part of the The employment and development policy. I talked about the quantity of money that migrants send back home. It's not only money that can be sent, know-how as well can be transferred. If China is where it is today, it is because they understood that the Chinese know-how has to be sent back home, especially in the US where they had facilities. There is need for transfer of development, transfer of know-how, development of human capital. This is one of the major stakes of this millennium. Everyone is fighting to fight the best, to grab the best. And the financial capacity that some can bring in the local economy, because it's about cash flow as well. There is need for cash flow, inflow and outflow. I will end on that. Thank you.